Hey folks, welcome back to the Darren Harris Podcast. It is episode 12. Last week I had a podcast about gun control and mass shootings, and I had a guest lined up that was not able to make it, but he is here this week to discuss some gun laws and some issues that I'm sure that we all would like to know about. He used to be a federally licensed firearms dealer, but he has since then changed his profession. But he does have a good amount of knowledge about this subject. So I'm anxious to have on my guest today, and his name is David Chittum, and he'll be joining me here in a little bit. But first, we got to get through a few things. I'd like to give a shout out today to Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock, which is it's awesome. I love both those guys. They're both comedians, and I follow both of them. And it's very cool because on September 3rd, they will be in London together, and they are joining forces on a comedy show in London, which I hope that it will continue over here, because I know that it's just absolutely going to sell out, because if in case you guys missed it, both of these guys within like a month or something like that, like a month and change, both of them were assaulted on stage. But I'm anxious to hear about their tour or their show that's coming up, and hopefully it will turn into a tour. So big shout out to that. But today's Dope Shit Award actually goes to Dave Chappelle. And the reason why it goes to Dave Chappelle is because he donated the ticket sales from his Buffalo show to help the victims' families from the Buffalo shooting, which I just think that is super dope of that guy, man. Because people don't have to do that, but he decided, I know wherever he was sold out, and I know the tickets weren't cheap, and he just decided to donate that whole, lump sum of money to those victims' families. And I think that is a class act, and for that, Dave Chappelle, my man, you get the Dope Shit Award of the week. Moving right along to EarBudz. What am I listening to? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I was on and I had told everybody that Kendrick Lamar had a new album coming out relatively quickly, and the album was called Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it is the Dope Factor 5. I think it's dope. Although, from what I understand, it actually took a hard tumble down the Billboard charts, which I don't think he's really worried about that. He's the only rapper with a like a Pulitzer or a Nobel Peace, some sort of prize that he got for recognition for his writing, and because he's absolutely outstanding. But I listened to the whole album a couple times, actually. I listened to the whole album yesterday, and I listened a few days ago to some of the tracks on the album. And I just want to tell you that it is a little bit of this, a little bit of that. He sings a little bit. There's some really obscure type tracks, but still they round it out. It's very well blended. Lots of good tracks. I can't really name any off the bat, but I just wanted to let you know that this album is definitely worth listening to, if not worth getting altogether. I am getting it myself. I think it's something that I like to have. I'm a big fan of Kendrick Lamar. I have all of his music, so I think this would be good in my collection. So that is the EarBudz for this week. And I'm going to take a break really fast, and when I come back, we will have the strain of the week. Hey folks, welcome back to the program. I just had to step off for a couple minutes and get a word from our sponsor, but today we have Leafly's Strain of the Week, which I'm kind of excited about. It was really cool. My wife actually went and got this from the dispensary. It's called Extraterrestrial Bananas. And it's fucking bananas, man. I got to tell you, it was what she got. It was 26.2 THC, which I just thought was just wow. Like it was, and you could tell, but it's a hybrid. So where some of these sativas have me being a little more productive, this one kind of made me relax a little bit, which was okay. I need to relax. I've had some tough dealings lately, and I need to calm the fuck down. So that was actually, it was a really good strain to help calm your ass down, and that's what I mean. Really, they should just rename it the "Calm the Fuck Down" strain. So. It was very talkative. I was able to, sit with my wife, and we had a friend over for dinner. We sat with our friend, and we had just about 3 hours of just in-depth conversation. We laughed, we cried. It was really good. But at the end of the day, it was the catalyst that I was able to kind of open up to my friend. My friend is a therapist, so I opened up to her about some things. But it definitely made me talk some shit about what the hell I'm going through. So if you got writer's block or any kind of block like that, is a good strain for that. It helps you with creativity. Definitely helps you with some stress. It's not. The pain management wasn't really, but it was very good for stress and anxiety. The pain, my shoulder still hurt. I mean, it did a little bit, but it wasn't like, some of these other strains that I've had that are specifically for pain. And I just want to say that I really, really, really enjoyed it. So if you guys are able to go out and get it, the Leafly strain of the week is Extraterrestrial Bananas, and it is a hybrid. So. And now on to what's popping. Okay, I have a guest today. My guest was supposed to be here last week. He is a gun aficionado named David Chittum. And what I did is I took our segment. The next segment is actually a Zoom call that we had. So I have pre-recorded a Zoom call with Dave that I'm going to air here in just a moment, so everybody can hear the rest of the conversation from last week. If hopefully you'll learn some things. You'll be enlightened, because I definitely learned some things. Last week I had quoted some laws, which I think was more of a misunderstanding than me being wrong altogether. But he actually came through and kind of clarified all of those things. So it was a pleasure to have him on the show. So without any further ado, I am going to introduce my guest for the evening, or my guest for this podcast, Mr. David Chittum.
Yeah. Thank you for happening. Thanks for having me over here. I'm excited to be on the Darren Harris podcast. Had technical difficulties with the jet last week.
Yeah, we had a little bit of difficulties.
Got the jet back in the underground bunker, and we got our Wi-Fi back on and headphone working and everything.
That's right. Well, cheers to you, my man.
Ready for action. And to you, sir.
Dave is actually sitting right over there. He's actually a guest on my podcast and also a guest in the home at the same time. But because we're sitting here, we're having a discussion about my podcast last week. We were talking about it, and you're fine, baby. You can come on by. We were talking about it last week, and he had listened to it, and you had had some insight. There were some things that I had messed up, and what I really wanted to do is have you on to kind of clarify a few of those things, and I have a few questions for you as well.
Perfect. My main thing that, and we've had these conversations a few times, and I really think in this arena of gun control and trying to deal with gun violence and things that are going on in the world today, that there are some reasonable answers, some reasonable compromises. And a lot of people just don't understand the details of the laws and
Sure.
what the roadblocks are. Where are the pinch points that keep us from being able to make success in this field? Because I've been around guns since I was a kid. I'm a country boy. We had utilitarian guns when we were kids, and we weren't able to handle them when we were kids. Had to work up to a BB gun.
I was gonna say, why don't you give us a brief synopsis of your background with firearms, just to kind of.
Well, so I've just been around them most of my life. I've never been really a hunter. It's something that's been always interesting and fascinating to me.
Right.
From a mechanical aspect, I really enjoy target shooting and just different it's kind of one of those nerd things. People like to take computers apart and do things with them, and it's always been an interest to me. Over the years, I've done a good bit of shooting and training, different types of training, some from target shooting to tactical shooting, self-defense type stuff. I've done military training, police training, and worked with some people that were really highly qualified. Some friends that are published and, have a lot of practical data and scientific data behind them. And so it's just been kind of one of my hobbies over the years. I bought and sold guns. I've been a gun owner most of my life, and as an individual. And then for some years, I had a federal firearms license and was a dealer in firearms. I bought guns. My niche was mainly buying estate pieces and collectible firearms and selling them in online auctions.
Sure.
And I bought and sold guns in pretty much any way you can think of, all completely legal. I've been very diligent at understanding and knowing the laws relative to firearms, because if you don't, you will go to federal prison. There's no makeup on that one, and you never get to own a firearm again.
I actually made a mistake last week on my podcast, and I had said something about the laws here in the state that we live in that wasn't exactly true. Or was not necessarily true, or it was just maybe misunderstood. That there is no license requirement to own a gun here in the state of Florida. But there's not a permit or a license, but people were thinking I was meaning a driver's license. Right. And so,
and we talked about that. What you said wasn't actually incorrect, but you used the term license, which, and the reason that it becomes important is, like I told you before, it comes relative to certain things that gun owners are concerned about. And when you mentioned it, you were thinking of like a gun license or a gun permit of any type, and you don't have to have a permit or a license to own a gun in the state of Florida at all, or to buy a gun. There's no such thing.
Right.
There's no gun registration in the state of Florida. There's no federal gun registration.
Right.
In other states, there is gun registration.
Right. Just not in Florida and not federally, but certain states do have their own sort of gun registration to keep track of their records.
Right. And that's the main, my main thing is that I think for us to have a legitimate conversation and find legitimate solutions that everyone can agree on and actually come into fruition, you have to really understand what's going on, because everything's disinformation on both sides. And it's a very emotional issue. It's very important. And there's a lot of technical issues to it. There's a lot of technical things to it. I mean, it's, people don't understand what is an AR-15. You got one side saying, well, it shoots 22s, and you got another side saying it tears people apart.
Right.
Well, there's very, scientific detail to exactly what that weapon is designed for, how it functions, and what it does to you.
Right.
Most of what you hear has nothing to do with facts and information that are already actually there.
Right.
And it's a miss. So there's a lot of, I don't want to get too far into one side or another. I want to answer your questions and try and be, a resource for people to be able to make an informed decision, because it is important. I think there are solutions that can happen. I think that once people understand where those little sticking points are, they'll find compromises.
Right.
And I think when they understand how things already are and that these options are accessible, they'll also probably start asking questions about why aren't we already doing these things.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of it is like going back to the AR-15 thing, and nobody's saying that you shouldn't own one or can't own one. I'm not saying that at all. I think that a lot of people are just, like you said, worried or concerned about what they represent, and they basically represent, it's an assault weapon. And it's, I like it or not, it's been used to, for lack of a better phrase, terrorize certain parts of the population. as of recently, this year, or last year, ended with 693 mass shootings. And this year, we're on task to beat that. Now, I'm not saying that that's directly the gun makers or the gun itself, because it's really not. It comes down to the person, but it's the weapon that people are, for lack of a better phrase, have demonized behind what has been taking place recently in the media, because that's been the weapon of choice in a lot of cases. I won't say in most cases, but in a lot of cases, people who commit these mass shootings have resulted to or chosen an AR-15 style weapon.
Right. And it's a very accessible weapon. That's one of the, that's definitely one of the issues, is it's very, very accessible.
Right.
And there's millions of them out there. You can buy them fairly inexpensively, and you can spend a lot of money on them. But it's not, there's a lot more to the story than that. You really framed it really well, and it is something that's become a symbol of the problem.
Right.
But I would suggest that that's not, that the pursuit of that is in anything more than being a symbol of the problem is a distraction. I would suggest that there's a guns, and I can answer any kind of technical questions about what this gun does or that gun, the difference between using a revolver and an AR and AK, shotgun, whatever. My point is that the AR in itself as a weapon, yes, it shoots a lot of bullets fast. A lot of guns do.
Right.
An AR-15, you can shoot a lot of bullets fast, but I have a 12 gauge that I use for in my house for self-defense.
Right, of course.
Hopefully I never have to use it, but it's loaded with old-fashioned
buckshot.
Yeah, buckshot, double buck. Well, depending on what kind of rounds you get, and there's all kind of crazy rounds now, but just a old-fashioned buckshot has between 7 and 9, roughly 35 to 38 caliber slugs inside of it.
Right.
So you let that off at one time.
Yeah, you take half of somebody's body off.
And you have depending on if you're the pattern spreads out, it's a whole different type. I guess if you want to talk about carnage, a bird gun is far worse than an AR-15 when you're up close. Now, an AR-15 at range, like the guy that shot up the concert in Las Vegas.
Right.
He was.
That's pretty.
He has optics. They take 18-year-old kids and put them in the Army and teach them to shoot an AR-15 at 600 yards with iron sights.
Well, see, I think that's part of the problem here now, is that these people who are, these younger people, 18 years old, the guy who was in Buffalo, I believe he was 18. The gentleman, not the gentleman, but the guy who was down in Texas, I believe he was also 18. And I think what's been happening is there's been a rash of these younger shooters having access or basically, for lack of access to these firearms or these types of firearms with very little background or any of that. So I think that's one of the things that we were going to talk about. But I do have to say I have to take a break really fast, and when we come back, we will discuss more about this situation here in America as far as the mass shootings in this country. I am joined by my man David Chittum here on the Darren Harris podcast. I'll be right back after a short pause. Hey folks, today's program is being brought to you by Your Pleasures Erotic Health and Wellness Boutique. Your Pleasures has a wide variety of adult educational materials, top-notch adult novelties and clothing, real-world dating and relationship advice, and more. Pleasures, that's Your Pleasures, not only focuses on erotic pleasure and satisfaction, we aim to educate people about the health and wellness benefits of intimacy. We are here to prove that sexuality is not naughty, it's necessary. So stop by Your Pleasures, that's ur-pleasures.com, and see for yourself. That's yourpleasures.com. All right, folks, we are back with the podcast with my guest, David Chittum. When we left, we were talking about age. The age of the people who were recently in these mass shootings recently in the country. So we're talking about how to basically what would we like to see happen in some of the laws that kind of surround the availability of guns.
Okay, so the age topic is a really interesting conversation, and again, like I say, it's very dramatic when people are talking about it. And an 18-year-old can walk into a gun shop and legally buy a AR-15 at will. And it's easy to say, well, that's wrong, shouldn't be that way. And that's a real conversation. And we may want to frame the laws that way. I don't know that I would disagree with that.
Right.
But it depends on the circumstances. Shooting is an Olympic sport, target shooting.
Right.
If you look up the age of most of the people that are in the Olympics for target shooting, I think you'll find that they're
pretty young.
They're young. ROTC was taught in schools. There's been, back in the old days, there was gun training in schools.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer that teaching a kid, about firearms and what they can do and how to handle them safely and stuff like that is far more important, or a far better strategy than just letting them, sneak up on one day. And the knowledge they have comes from movies and video games.
Right.
We talked about this the other day. It's harder to get a driver's license than it is to buy a gun. I'm a big proponent in training.
Right. Well, we were talking about that. Now, listen to this. I was doing a little bit of research, and I was looking at Japan, or I was looking at countries with the rate of gun violence per country. And I looked, and Japan has the absolute lowest. Japan and South Korea have the lowest gun violence in the world. And part of it, I started digging around, and they have a very stringent policy or a regiment before you're able to possess and own a gun. And you are able to own and possess firearms in Japan, but there is mandatory training. You have to pass a written exam, plus you have to pass a physical and mental health evaluation. The police will go and ask your family, your job, your wife, your kids about your character. There's lots of stuff. There's lots of other hoops that you have to jump through. And like I said, if you want to own a firearm in Japan, you can own a firearm, but there's only there are 3 types of firearm. You can own a rifle, a shotgun, or an air pistol. You can't own a pistol in Japan. But as a direct result, their gun death rate every year is 0.003 or something ridiculous like that. Now, we are number 1 in the world, as far as that. And I'll tell you what, we surpass every other country by a long shot. Now, that was something that has been mentioned a lot, and I'll take issue with that if you don't mind. Sure.
And I want to just put the Japan thing in perspective. It's an interesting study in, handling and how guns, in ways that you can deal with guns and so on, but you have to put that in perspective. Japan was completely disarmed.
Right. They disarmed. Well, the reason that happened is because we disarmed them.
Right. It's an island nation. So it's an interesting experiment, but when it's hard to compare that with the United States, because in the United States, there's millions and millions and millions of firearms. They're legally owned without any kind of registration or any kind of document. Different places have different laws and stuff like that. But it's not like you could affect the same rules here that you could in Japan.
Right. It would
practically speak. No, it would be impossible. And
well, I don't necessarily know that it would be impossible. I just think that it would be extremely difficult. But where there's a will, there's a way. But that's a problem. The wills are this. It's some people want to do this about it. Other people want to do this about it. And
I think that's right. Well, I don't know if it. So here's the thing to me when it comes to that is I don't think it's a matter of will to do something one way or another. There's certain sticking points on both sides.
Right.
And you have to really ask questions as to why one side has this, one side has that. And I think when you find these little details of where these impasses are, there are real ways to make progress on that. And I think there's real questions to ask about why we're not making progress in those sections. And I'm just going to jump into one of the things we talk about, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because it's one of the hot topics on this, and it should be, is the mental health issue related to these mass shootings or any kind of gun violence for that matter.
Absolutely.
And buying a gun and stuff like that. And I know in your podcast, and we've talked about this personally before, that you believe that's a big part of, owning a gun and so on. And so I want to kind of, talk about that as far as what is currently in place and what may or may not be available.
Sure.
Because I think it's a huge deal, and it's one of the things that people don't understand.
And I believe that to be true. I believe people, it is very they don't shed enough light on it.
Right. And when I say that, I mean that they don't understand how it actually works in the gun world.
Right.
Okay. So we talked about this earlier today, so we're going to do a little bit of rehash here between you and me, but here's how it works in buying a gun. There's federal laws that impact selling a gun to someone. A federally licensed firearm dealer sells a gun to someone. There's laws about that. If you're a private individual selling to someone else, you're actually under the same requirements. You can't sell a gun to someone that's a felon. You can't sell a gun to someone that's mentally incapacitated or using federally illegal drugs, including marijuana.
Is there any kind of oversight to enforce that though?
Well, there's some. That's the important part of this conversation. So there's a federal background check system. If you go to a gun dealer and that gun dealer is in his store or he's in a gun show, then that gun dealer has to do a federal background check on you before he can sell you that firearm.
Right.
That background is provided by the state that you're in.
Okay.
It's not a federal system.
It's just provided by the individual state.
Well, it's a federal system, but it's provided by the state. So there's a federal database.
Okay.
If that makes sense, which, throws a lot of things crazy because every state has their own little system to deal with it.
Right.
But anyone that has to, all these statements about you can go buy a gun, you can go to a gun store here, there, anywhere without a license or without any kind of background check. That's nonsense. You can buy, they talked about the internet sales were a big thing for a long time. I did a ton of internet sales.
Right.
If you can buy a gun from me on the internet, I ship it to a dealer near you, and you go to that dealer and you fill out the paperwork and do the federal background check, and they transfer that weapon to you. If you don't pass the background check, they ship it back to me. I don't ship it to you.
Now that applies also for somebody like, say, if you wanted to buy a gun from Joe Schmo down the street who had a pistol you wanted to purchase. Absolutely.
It's different. Again, it's different places. I can actually ship a gun in certain guns. I can ship, I don't want to quote this because I don't want to quote it wrong, but I can ship certain guns in the state of Florida from one person to another without going through an FFL dealer currently.
Right. Okay.
But if I go out of the state, it's definitely part of the federal system. And, that's kind of one of those weird little loopholes, but that's part of the problem is it's different in every state.
Right.
But the federal system is not different. Most of gun buying has to do with the federal system, whether it's personal sales or whether it's sales through a dealer. So you can't go to a dealer anywhere in the country and buy a gun without ID and without doing a federal background check.
So I was going to ask you, what do you think? What does it look like to you? What does gun reform or whatever you want to call it? What does that look like to you? What would you, in order to help, like I said, curtail? Because the other part of this is not only talking about the guns, but the violence that has been in the media recently behind them. Because mass shootings, like it or not, it's like the thing to do in the United States now, and that's people are looking at us like it's crazy over here.
Yeah, and I think that again, I don't want to get into that. We got to be careful about getting into the emotional propaganda side, this, that, and the other. In Saudi Arabia,
not really.
In Saudi Arabia, they set schools on fire.
This right here, this ain't the news. This is how you feel and how I feel. So, like I said, what does it look like to you? I mean, what would you like to see happen?
So I think one of the big things, and we both agree on this is one of the big issues in this is mental health.
Right.
I think you'll find through research, and again, this isn't the show where I'm going to quote a bunch of stuff.
Sure.
But I think you'll find that most of the people that were involved in these situations had documented mental health problems and were on pharmaceuticals and things. If not all of them, most of them were on pharmaceuticals and psychotropic drugs and stuff.
Now,
that were
how are they able to? How are they able to? If they went through said background check, how are they able to obtain firearms?
Well, that comes to the crux of the problem. The federal system gets certain reporting. Okay, if there's a domestic violence incident, that will go into the system. I will not be allowed to purchase a firearm.
Right.
If I'm a felon, I'm not allowed to purchase a firearm.
Right.
If I get, like in the state of Florida, and again, this is different states. In the state of Florida, there's a thing called a Baker Act. So if I go crazy,
right,
and the cops have to take me, to a facility to get evaluated and chilled out, they put you on I think it's a 3-day lockdown or something like that.
Right.
That goes into the legal system, and that may or may not make it into the federal background check system. But if I'm a minor, nothing goes in. If I'm talking to my psychiatrist, nothing goes in. If the school, if I make a threat at the school, nothing goes into that system. None of that stuff goes into the system. You can take juvenile records, juveniles that are picked up on all kinds of problems, gun charges, everything else. None of that goes back into the federal background system unless it's a felony or those certain categories. Mental health in particular, and now this is where here's one of those question points, okay? You got to ask, why is it this way?
Right.
No mental health, if you take how many millions and millions of people in the country take anxiety medicines and stuff? Should that preclude you from having a gun? Maybe so, maybe not.
Right.
You could be a kid that's come up in, treatment his whole life and have all kinds of problems, been institutionalized. You can have people that have been institutionalized half their life and be on every kind of psychotropic medicine you can think of. They are not in that background system.
Right.
Why not?
Right. That's my
Why
point.
not?
Why is that not happening?
Well, so one of the answers to that, if you really want to be a little bit cynical,
sure,
is that there's a lobby in this gun debate that no one talks about. It's the pharmaceutical industry.
Sure.
Okay. I don't have all the answers, okay? But the big point is these are some of the real sticking points, and these are some of the real issues. There is a reason that none of that gets to the system. There is a reason. If you smack one of your kids, it's in the system. They will literally come to your house and take all your guns away.
Right.
Doesn't matter how many you have, and you cannot own guns anymore.
Right.
But you can frickin', you can set a school on fire and be in treatment your whole adolescent life and make every threat in the world, and you are not in that system. You can walk into that store the day you're 18 and buy that firearm. And by the way, that clerk, the owner of the gun store,
right,
the law is a law-abiding citizen following the law. They don't know any different. They don't have any tools any different than you. Then it's not their fault.
Right. They have no control.
I should be able to go in there and buy an AR-15 when I'm 18 and I have no other problems. You know what I mean? I shouldn't have to prove that I'm sane. Now, I know that's going to differ with some of your ideas, but the point is, you need to understand that how much is not in that background check system, and ask the question, why is that not in there?
Well, I do think, why is it not in there? But what I do think is that there needs to be a strenuous mental health evaluation for anyone wanting to purchase any firearm. I don't care what it is.
Well, we've talked about this, and I heard this on the other one, and I'm not. I know we can differ on things, but my response to that is going to be it's a simple case of proving how do they say that? Proving or disproving a negative. I'm sorry, I'm not saying it the right way, but in order to, it's saying for me to have my rights as an owner, I have to prove that I'm not crazy.
Yeah,
I want to be assumed that I'm not crazy because I believe it's my inherent right.
But you can't always assume that. You can't always assume, because when you assume, what do? You make an ass out of you and me. And a lot of times when people assume shit,
Well, no, but it's a point of law.
Hold on. Hold on. Now, this guy that went and purchased this gun down in Texas, clerk that sold him the gun, you're right, it's not his fault. But the clerk assumed that this guy was in his right state of mind, even though this guy had just said, I'm going to shoot my grandmother and then I'm going to go shoot this fucking school up and blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? But the clerk didn't know that this guy was in his right state of mind. He was 18 years old. Now, if somebody had done some due diligence, like ran a proper mental health check on this kid,
almost every one of these
picked
things,
up some red flags.
The Parkland shooting in South Florida. The Parkland shooting in South Florida. The reports that I've seen, and I'm not going to, again quote this, but the reports that I've seen was that there was someone that was called the cops 40 plus times and called the FBI 5 or 6 times, saying that this kid was nuts and threatening to shoot up the school. He's got a rifle. There was repeated calls.
The dude, both of these dudes, the dude in Buffalo, they had called and said this dude was in there looking strange a few days before. And dude, down in Texas, this dude basically said he told people he was gonna do it on his social media. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I mean, what is it gonna take? I mean,
well, like I say, you got to.
Both of those guys were 18, questions. By the way.
Yeah, you got to keep asking questions because none of those circumstances, in none of these shootings, these circumstances add up. Someone's hiding some crap in all of these. And I'm not going to try and be some conspiracy theorist or something, but understand, like with this incident in Texas, now this is just what I know, and I'm not going to draw any freaking conclusions on it in any way.
Right.
But just a couple little things that I happen to know about. Number one, I guess he had 2 Daniel Defense rifles, and they made a big deal that he knew which rifles he wanted to buy and so on like that. And he had a couple, a little while before he was 18, he tried to get help buying them and they wouldn't help him, blah, blah, blah. And then he went and bought one and he bought another one a few days later. A Daniel Defense rifle starts at roughly $2,500 each.
Yeah. How does somebody 18
and the sack of ammo that he was carrying is probably another $1,000 with clips and stuff like that. So you're talking about a lot of money. And, so you got to ask some questions. This idea that all those cops, I mean, yeah, it hits you like a fucking ton of bricks that all these cops were standing outside of the door of this classroom while he was killing kids.
Yeah, fucking cowards.
Okay, listen, first of all, I know science on it. I've been around a mass shooting. I was actually almost like right in the middle of a mass shooting one time, and these cops don't get enough training. There is naturally going to be people that shrink from the violence. Okay, it's a natural. You can't even blame them. It's a natural habitat.
Well, you signed up for the fucking job. I can't blame you. You signed up for the job to protect and serve, and you're not protecting these kids at all, man.
Listen to what I'm saying.
Them dudes didn't do any protecting. They ran in there, got their own kids, and ran the fuck out.
Listen to what I'm saying though. There's a certain number of people that are going to shrink from violence no matter what. Okay.
But whole force.
That's just human nature. Well, that's my question. That's my question.
But you're right though. Why?
That's my question. 20 people outside that door. Yeah. Not one of those men with firearms on. That does not make sense.
That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't
make sense.
You're exactly right.
Some of them are going to shrink from it. I guarantee you that.
You're right. Some of them will shy away.
Freaking people outside that door. You're going to tell me they all sit there and listen to those shots go off for an hour? I don't believe that.
That shit's crazy to me.
Believe that.
That shit is crazy to me. They was calling them.
Do not fucking believe
them. Kids was in there calling these people. They was in there calling these people.
Listen, like I say, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't want to get into all that shit, but people need to keep asking questions.
That's
people need
exactly
to ask,
right.
Is the fucking AR-15 the one that shot the kid? How did this kid get to this? How did he get the weapon? How did he get?
This is what I think needs to happen. I really do think that there needs to be some sort of strenuous evaluation, and it should not be left up to the individual states. It should be something that is broad across the country. That everybody can come together on and come to a decision on and say, all right, we can go forward with this right here that everybody agrees on, but it's something that protects our children. Because this year, hold on one second. I looked something up. There's been like 27 school shootings this year.
I got you, man.
Yeah,
And I
27
get it.
school
It's
shootings
an
this year.
urgency, and it should be an
Yeah.
urgency. But we really got to go to those. We got to move past stating the facts and move on to what are we going to do about it.
Well,
And
that's
what's the
exactly
right
right.
thing to do
Well,
about
the
it.
thing about it is we also have to identify what's going on. Now, these guys had two different motivations. The guy down in Texas, I guess he was a lonely dude, but the guy up in Buffalo was a solid racist. You know what I'm saying? With the sole purpose of, it was just with the sole purpose of going to kill people of color. You know, so
and the other question
where do we go for that? Because he was someplace, he learned that behavior. He was 18 years old and he learned that behavior from somewhere. Where is that?
Yeah, and see, that's a great question, Darren. And I get that you're in favor of the the psychological analysis on front before you can get a weapon, and that's maybe everyone votes for that. Maybe that's the way to go. Maybe I'm wrong about it, but here's the general problem with that, and the problem that you're going to run into with people that are on the other side of the fence from that is they're going to say, okay, so you're going to make a government agency much like the IRS that is going to take me under psychological evaluation and make me give up all my personal secrets and business and everything. And then one of those fucking bureaucrats is going to decide whether or not I'm qualified to have A, any gun, B, a pea shooter, C, a hunting rifle, what the fuck ever. Does that,
if you don't have any of those issues, then why would it matter? And that's what I'm saying. And if you don't have any,
it would matter because
not for nothing,
I don't
and not
have
for
the
nothing,
right. I
and
don't
not for
have
nothing.
No, let me answer that. Don't go on to the next thing yet, please. Let me answer that first part because it's important. What would it matter was that I now do not have the inherent right to self-defense.
Sure, you do. Absolutely, you do.
Not
yes,
not
you do.
relative.
Yes,
To,
you
not
do.
Relative to
you
my,
absolutely have. You have your right. You have your right for self-defense. But if you are found psychologically incompetent to possess a firearm, you shouldn't have one.
That's
just like
already
felons,
the law.
like
That's
well,
already the law.
Hold on.
That's not reported.
Hold on now. Like the question I asked you the other day. If a drug dealer had an AR-15, you basically said that no, he shouldn't have that. But you can have an AR-15, right? But why? Why? I mean, this guy. I mean, if he doesn't have any, you know what I'm saying? He just sells drugs. Maybe he's. But
if he's a drug dealer that doesn't have, you got to make that's the problem, Darren. But we were talking about realistic laws and how to approach them. If he's a drug dealer that's never been convicted or never can pass the background check, then I get it. To take it away from him is to take it away from me.
Now see these guys, okay, the guys that shot these things, now the guys that shot these places up, right? Do you think they should have had those AR-15s?
I wish they hadn't.
No. The question was, do you think they should have had those AR-15s?
I don't know the situation well enough. I feel like they had obvious. No, listen.
No. Like you told me before. Now we're gonna go not until you answer the question.
You can't shout me down, bro. You can't shout me down. I'm trying to answer the question.
Okay.
I'm trying to answer.
That's a yes or no question, but okay.
No, I'm trying to answer the question.
That's a yes or no question.
It goes back to exactly what we talked about before. If they had psychological problems, if they were making threats and the enforcement knew about it and put that into the system, they would not have gotten those weapons. They walked into the store and bought them.
So you do agree that there needs to be some sort of psychological evaluation?
No, it's not the same thing. They already had instances that should have been reported into the system. The system's not set up to receive that information. It's not there. That information never goes into this. There's a system there that does not report mental health issues. No, they shouldn't have. They had obvious issues. They were making obvious threats. It wasn't reported into.
But how is that different from somebody else? I mean, how can you evaluate somebody else if you're not evaluating this person? You can just go ahead and say this guy can have one, but this guy can't, based on the way that they look.
No. I get what you're asking me, but the answer. So you're starting from one side, Darren. Here's the other side: is I need a reason why you take my right away from me.
Well, nobody's taking, but that's the thing. You keep saying that people are taking your rights away. Nobody is taking your rights away. You can still hold on. You can still own a gun. You can still have a gun after you complete said training and said psychological evaluation.
Right. I believe, and listen, maybe that's the way to go. I believe in the training part wholeheartedly. The psych evaluation thing, I think, is a step too far.
Well, do you think? Do you think crazy people? Hold on now. Do you think crazy people should have guns?
No, my point is that they're already not reporting that.
Right. Well, that's the thing. So, do you think it should be reported?
Absolutely. That's my whole point.
So then you think,
the problem in the system is that.
So you do think that there should be more extensive psychological background checks or psychological evaluations?
There should be. I don't think you should be required to undergo a psychological evaluation in order to own a gun.
I do.
I think. Well, let me finish. I think that psychological info and all these mental health information that's in your system through adolescence should be reported into the background check system for buying a gun. If I don't have any of that in my background, if I don't have any issues, I don't think I should have to go take a psych eval.
Well, that should be happening. That should be happening anyway. But I think if you are going to use any instrument that was designed to take a life with the sole purpose to take a life, that yes, there should be some sort of psychological evaluation attached to that.
That's a valid opinion. I mean,
and now what's happening? Hold on. And now what's happening is you have instances in certain states. You can be gifted a gun by your dad when you're 16. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Here you go. Right. But like you said, they're hunters. You know what I'm saying?
No, but there's laws about that already, Deron.
There's
already laws about that.
Right.
If you're 16, you can be gifted a gun.
Right.
You cannot even hold that gun in your hand legally unless your parent or guardian is standing there and hands it to you and you hand it back to them. There are laws about that already.
Sure.
Now, to say I'm a big believer in teaching kids about guns. We go into school and we have the driver's ed class. We got to sit through the DUI classes where they show the mangled bodies and the wrecks. And I don't know if they still do that. When we were kids, they did.
Yeah, it was called Signal 30. I remember that shit.
Yeah, they show you the pictures of the people in the mangled wrecks of the cars. We don't do that with guns. I believe in training. I believe
that also. I believe that kids should definitely
show the difference in. I can describe to you the difference in what a 223 does to the human body compared to a 12 gauge, compared to a 357, compared to whatever. I'm just a nerd, and that's not what I'm saying is important in school. But yeah, it would be important in school if it was real rather than a video game.
Right. Well, that's the thing. People don't have any tangibility. It's not really tangible to them.
We go into these. I mean, you want to talk about psychological issues and stuff. So here's a backstory to this. I know we're getting long here, but here's a backstory to this. In February, there was a conclusion to a lawsuit over the Sandy Hook shooting in which Remington Firearms settled for $73 million to a number of the survivors and parents and stuff of Sandy Hook.
Right.
So there's a law in the books that says firearms companies can't be sued for violence done with their firearms. That's been around for a long time. Well, they surpassed that law or challenged that law by saying that Remington was marketing to kids because they had advertisements with, and I think there's more to the story. I don't know. I want some more research. I'd love some comments, but they won this lawsuit based on the idea that they said that Remington used illegal marketing practices by marketing these weapons to kids.
Right.
And because of that, this shooter, wanted to go shoot up the school. And they freaking, eventually settled over the thing, $73 million. So now after this shooting in Texas, and this is, interesting to me, I'm not making this on the news,
right?
But after this shooting in Texas down there, 2 days, it could have been 3 days later, they announced a lawsuit against Daniel Defense. Again, we mentioned that this shooter down there had two very expensive Daniel Defense rifles. And so now, like literally no more than 3 days later, they've announced that they're going to press a lawsuit against Daniel Defense under the same circumstances that Daniel Defense in their social media marketed to, had some footage of a parent giving a kid a gun or kids shooting guns or something.
Right.
There's nothing illegal about that. That's, literally that's, now, again, we go back to like I said, the Olympic team is kids. Target shooting goes back as far as we have freaking history.
I agree
There's
with that.
bullseyes on the caves, man.
I agree
it's
with
not
that.
like
But
it's a new thing. It's not evil in and of itself.
But hold on.
And again, let me just mention this. It seems like really strange that there was just happened to be, this
But there are some incidents where you have parents.
Defense in particular 2 days after this event happened.
Well, there are some things, some issues, incidents where you have parents that aren't responsible themselves enough to have a firearm that gift their kids firearms. And also, you have parents that like I'm sure the person from the Buffalo shooting, I'm not sure where he obtained his firearm, but he was 18 and he had to learn that behavior before the age of 18.
Exactly. Well, that's what they got.
So where is it coming from? Is it coming from his parents? I'm not going to speculate and say that. Is it coming from the internet? Very quite possible.
The interesting thing about me, let's go back to this lawsuit, because I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, I'm not a video gamer.
Right.
Okay, so I
play games.
Someone could help me with this, but I'm almost sure that I've seen Daniel Defense weapons in particular on video games. And I know for a fact that there are branded weapons on video games.
Yes.
Now, so this lawsuit against Remington, this is really interesting to me. This lawsuit against Remington over Sandy Hook, and now a new lawsuit against Daniel Defense over this shooting, based on them marketing to kids, had to do with their social media marketing. But no one has mentioned what the kids are playing in the video games. Why is that? Was no one going to attack Sony or Activision or? I don't understand. I'm asking. I'm not assuming anything. I'm asking the question.
No.
Because those weapons have all been intertwined in games.
They put disclaimers.
Whatever. Disclaimers are not legal. Disclaimers are not legal documents. It's just like people like we were talking about before. Somebody swimming in the gator infested waters with the sign all over. It says these waters are infested by gators, but they went swimming anyway. But think about the input, because we're asking the question: how is this getting so ingrained, and how is it? I think the question is, where is the insensitive coming from? Why are these kids gone so nuts? But think about the video games. This isn't new. They were complaining about this when we were kids. But think about the immersive quality of these video games that people will play for out, and thank God most of us can mentally tolerate it.
Right.
But as well as I mean, we're all idiots sitting here on Facebook and Instagram. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And then you got these highly immersive video games that are very detailed in the weaponry, and they have the blood splatter and so on. I mean, that's part of the culture.
Right.
That's part of the culture.
Been indoctrinated.
But the question, I want someone to answer the question: why are they suing Daniel Defense, which is a relatively small company? Well, you'd be
pissed off to know that Glock is getting sued here. I saw about a week ago. Somebody's trying to sue Glock also. Now, I do agree with the gun didn't do anything, because, like you said, it's the person, and that's why I believe that there needs to be more, up here. You know what I'm saying?
I think we're on the same page. It's a psych issue.
Right.
And like I say, I think the first, and whether or not you have a psych value before you get a gun is a big question. And I'll be honest with you, technically, you're never going to fucking get there. But I will say that my big problem is that there's a system in place. There is a background check system federally, and it does not. There's another side to this we have to go to after the next break. But we've talked about the legal system of buying through a firearms dealer, right? We haven't talked about the gun show loophole, personal sales.
Right.
But this, we can talk about that later. But the big thing is to understand, in my mind, on a mental health scale, first, what can we do now? What can we address? What's the important question is, why is it that someone can be fucking institutionalized half of their adolescence, their whole life or whatever, be on all kinds of psychotropic medication and stuff like that, and that is not part of the federal firearms background check system? You want to ask why this kid can walk in there and buy a gun? That's the answer.
Right.
Why?
I got 5 minutes left. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we're going to wrap it up. And it's the same question that I asked you before, which I think that, you got some pretty good insights. And the question was, what would you like to see happen? What would Dave Chittum, if Dave Chittum could make the law, what would you like to see happen?
My two main points are to get into, and it's a major thing, because what we're talking about is HIPAA laws and the Farmers pharmaceutical companies.
Sure.
And we need to make a decision. If you're on Xanax, does that disqualify you from having a gun? These are all legitimate decisions. There's nothing wrong with regulating firearms, but we have to make these decisions, and we have to make them in the presence of the almighty pharmaceutical companies. And we have to say, yes, we have HIPAA laws that, preclude you from reporting medical information on people. That's what this is. A lot of this is about.
Well, that's a lot of the reason that people don't have
my number one thing is we really need to look at, if you have, there's law enforcement action that doesn't get reported into that system.
Right.
You can be an adolescent. You can fucking pull a gun and wave it around town and everything like a million times. You're not reported into that system.
Right.
There's all kind of holes in the medical field. There's like no responsibility at all for psychology. You can walk into your psychologist office and say, listen, I got my gun. Isn't it pretty? Look at it. It's shiny. I'm walking down to the elementary school and I'm going to blow everyone up. Now, technically, they're required to report that to law enforcement. But in fact, it happens in sessions and conversations and shit over and over and over.
Right.
And it never goes to even if it goes to law enforcement, it doesn't necessarily end up in the background system. So that's something that needs to be addressed. And I want to detour real super quickly on this, because there is an answer to this. You asked me, well, what do you do? Well, so one of the answers is what they call red flag laws. And this is a new thing that's come up, and you really got to really ask yourself about this. Okay. Everyone's going to have a different opinion, but you got to ask yourself about this. Red flag law means that I can say, listen, my buddy Deron over there in the next apartment, his fucking dog barks a lot and he's really angry and he keeps complaining about dog poop. And I know he's got a gun over there. I know he's got an AR-15 and I think he looks a little crazy in the eyes. So I'm going to report him. Now listen, I'm okay. Chuckle. That's a red flag law. That's what it takes for the cops to come to your house and seize your firearms and put you under whatever supervision they feel is necessary. Now, key word, seize your firearms.
All right, we got 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Let's bring it to a close. Let's summarize what's going on here in the next 30 seconds.
Okay. So anyway, that's one of the things the one thing that I think is really addressing mental health issues in the background check system in a real way. That can also be done in private sales. In private sales, this whole gun show loophole thing is nonsense. In private sales, we're responsible for the same conditions as a dealer is to selling to someone, but we don't have access to the background check system. Why can't anyone have access to the background check system of selling firearm to another person? The other thing that the big thing, so it's two things, is addressing the mental health thing. The other big thing I think is important, and I've always coached people to do this. If you own a firearm, you should get training. You're not a responsible firearm owner if you do not train and practice with that weapon. I don't have a problem with that being mandated. I don't think most responsible firearm owners would have a problem with that being mandated. It should be necessary for anyone. And I don't have a problem with that. Now, that again, that covers a lot of different application, and there's a lot of different conditions to that. But training is, you shouldn't own a firearm. It's just like driving a car. You freaking take driver's ed. You have to take a test to drive a car. Those are valid concerns. Those are real issues.
Well, thank you very much, my man, for joining me on my podcast. You were outstanding. I really appreciate it. Okay, folks, that was my segment with my friend David Chittum. He had a lot of good things to say. I was pleasantly surprised. He was a little half in the bag. Both of us were kind of where we're having cocktails while we were doing this, but he did manage to get out some very poignant information, some very good information, and I want to have him back because, like I said, this is a topic that is going to continue. It seems like it's going to continue because, like I said, there's so many mass shootings. I mean, we are on task. There was like 600 and change last year, and we are on task to beat that this year. So, we are all frantically looking for a way or something to kind of help the United States out with this because, like I said, we're the worst at it. Japan is the best at it, but, they have some militant ass gun laws, but it helps to keep their citizens safe. You know what I'm saying? Which at the end of the day, what's more important to you? a gun or your child. And that's the way I look at it. My kids are the most important thing to me. So, I don't really give a damn about a gun. If I have to carry one to protect myself, so be it. But I will let you know it's the last resort and something that I am wholeheartedly against. I really don't. I mean, I'm from New York City, and I've never had to have a gun. I've had guns pulled on me, and I've never had to have a gun. I've seen people shot in the street, and I've never had to have a gun on me. I was robbed at gunpoint, and I never had after that, I never even had a gun after me. For me, it's just not something that I want to have the responsibility of. I don't really want to have the responsibility of taking somebody's life. Now, if somebody's trying to take my life, of course I need to, act, but, it has to be that. It has to be right up there with, nothing else can be done, but so many times, pulling a firearm is everybody's first inclination. People are so you hear this all the time. People are afraid to to catch these hands. Nobody wants to fight. Nobody wants to get a bloody lip. But the thing about it is I always remembered in the movie Friday, John Witherspoon says something to Ice Cube when he was fighting Debo at the end of the movie for his girl. Craig, Ice Cube, had pulled out a gun on Debo, but John Witherspoon stepped in and he said, son. He said, put the gun down. He said, you win some and you lose some. You use these, but you win some, you lose some, but you live to fight another day. And that right there made the most sense to me it ever has. So in that, for me, gun control is something that definitely needs to happen. The Second Amendment needs to be amended and revised because it needs to be, there needs to be more clarification. And also there needs to be, some psychological evaluation. Some people don't feel like they should have to do that, but I think it's a very necessary thing. So, and like I said, this is a subject that's going to continue on. So I will be talking about this again, I'm sure, here in the near future. So, and that is what's popping for this week. All right. This week on relationship goals. Last week, I sat down and basically there were some things that went down. My wife and I, we had, a falling out, not really a falling out, just a misunderstanding. And there were some things that were going on, with both of us, as far as, past things making themselves known in our present and future. But this week's relationship goal, or last week's relationship goal, was to leave the past in the past and focus on the future. And that is pretty much every relationship. If, it happened, you can't fucking change it. Nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can do is be educated about it and move forward. And that's the only thing you can do. If it's not a deal breaker, then forget it, man. Move forward. You know what I'm saying? Same thing. You know what I'm saying? Same thing. Both sides. If she's got somebody or he's got somebody, them people is in the past unless they bring those people into the present, and then it becomes an issue, but we don't want to do that. We want to move forward. We want to give these people, or your person, a clean slate. You know what I'm saying? Everybody goes through what they go through. Everybody has wants and needs, and, everybody, nobody's different. Everybody has those same wants and those same needs, and unfortunately, sometimes those things don't work out and people are able to remain certain friends, but what type of friends, and at what cost to your current relationship? So, I made a decision a long time ago that I don't need to be in touch with you. You know what I'm saying? If we done here, and especially if we don't have a real friendship, or we don't really share a real friendship, if it was just some physicality bullshit, I don't really need to know you. You know what I mean? It was cool for a while, and now the shit is over, and I haven't talked to you in a long time, so there's really even no need for me to know you or for you to know anything about me. You don't know anything about me anymore. You know what I'm saying? And really, honestly, what did you really know about me in the beginning other than physicalities? So, and I'm looking for a little more depth, and I have found exactly that. So I'm very happy with my wife. I'm very happy to be married to her, and that's what we had discussed last week. So what did we do? Well, I took the opportunity to make new memories, or try and make different memories or better memories, so that both of us could forget about, the respective people that had made their way into our future, our present and future relationships. So we took the opportunity to sit down and have a solid conversation with each other about who we are and what all these other people were and what they meant. We had a solid, like I said, a solid conversation about it. And, we've come to the agreement that, all those that happened in the past, and what's the most important thing is the things that are going on here right now with the both of us. So we went to Universal Studios and with some friends, and we connected with our friends a little bit better, made some good memories, took a lot of good pictures. We had other friends over for dinner and drinks, and it was the same thing, and we just made new memories. And then on top of that, one thing we like to do is we like to drive up and down the coast where we live, and that's another thing. We just rode up and down the coast, and we stopped on the beach, and had some medication, and we walked and we talked, and we bonded and became closer. And you'd be surprised when you do that how minuscule all that shit, like previous shit, how all that shit is not serious, is not anything to get yourself all worked up about. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. Shit happens. Keep it pushing. You know what I'm saying? So this week, the goal this week is, I've been in the house a long ass time. I sit my ass in the house on a daily basis. I go downstairs, and most days, I don't really, I'm just going down to the store, or I don't do a lot. I don't go a lot, anywhere a lot. Sometimes I do, but what I want to do, well, my wife always, whenever she wakes up, she tries to look her best. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes, as a man or men, we get to be a little bit lazy as far as our appearance and grooming are concerned. So this week, my goal is to take extra attention and special care on grooming, personal hygiene, and looking good for my wife. And just looking good. There's a lot of good looking motherfuckers out there. You know what I'm saying? A lot of them. A lot of good looking dudes, a lot of good looking women. A lot of them out there. You know what I'm saying? But if I can, keep my wife's eye, you know what I'm saying, by taking care of myself, or showing her that I'm taking care of myself, you know what I'm saying, then all the rest of these other motherfuckers don't really matter too much. And the same thing, if she can, and she does, she wakes up every morning, she jumps in the shower, she does her hair, she doesn't wear makeup, she's naturally beautiful, every now and then she'll wear a little bit of makeup, but she'll put on a little bit of makeup, a little bit of lipstick, and, she'll throw on a nice dress. She works from home. She don't go nowhere, but she makes sure that she look good every day. She look good for me every day. We don't go nowhere. You know what I'm saying? We might go to the store for a few minutes, but usually we're at the house. But she does take that extra time and that special care to make sure that she looks good for me. So the least I could do is return the favor. And by the way, folks, all of these relationship goals that I'm coming up with, or that I've had on my program, it's not just a 1 week thing and you're done. 1 week I'm going to do this, and then the next week we go back to who the fuck I was previously. This is something that continues. So everything that I have mentioned so far in my podcast about my relationship goals, I continue to practice those things every week. Because they are important to me. Because like I said, the last thing I want is to be a marital statistic. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be divorced. I don't want to be out here trying to date at 55, 56, 57. I ain't trying to do none of that. You know what I'm saying? I got who I want. I'm where I want to be at. So now it's time to nurture and take care of that. So with that being said, I think that is going to do it for my my podcast this week. But I just want everybody to remember, the U.S. so far this year has had 246 mass shootings. That's a lot. You know what I'm saying? So we need to get together, folks. I'd like to thank my wife. I would like to thank my best friend and my producer for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with everybody. You can follow me on my social media if you like. I'm Deron Teray Harris on Facebook, DeronTerae Harris on Facebook. I think I have 2 or 3 Facebooks. But on Instagram, I am Daron T. Harris, comedian. So you're more than welcome to follow me on my social media. And like I said, I'll be having some videos up on my YouTube, which is also Daron Harris. Some videos on my podcast. Not right away. We're still trying to work out the kinks with that to make sure, but soon you'll be able to watch me as opposed to just listening to me. You'll be able to do both. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for tuning in to my podcast. Again, I want to thank my guest, David Chittum, for joining us. And everybody, you have a great week, and I'll see you next week.